Good evening to everyone. Welcome you all for Day 5 of National Level Workshop on Research Methodology organized by the Department of BCom Corporate Secretaryship and Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Sri Krishnaswamy College for Women. Reports are more a medium of self-discipline than a way to communicate information. Writing the report is important. Reading it often is not. Hence, today's session would be the right choice, being the need of an hour and would provide more insights on report writing. It's a great pleasure and privilege for me to introduce our chief guest of the day, Dr. Anupama Chiragdev. Dr. Anupama holds a PhD degree from Gujarat University. Her thesis examined brand equity dimensions impact on buying behavior for cell phone, certified under UGC NET. She has pursued her MBA from Hemachandracharya North Gujarat University and Masters in Commerce from Gujarat University. She is a senior faculty in the area of marketing and associated with School of Business Law, Navrachana University, Vadodara. With more than a decade of experience, her contribution in previous institutes like Marwadi Education Foundations Group of Institution, Rajkot, and Global Institute of Management has been eminent in not only academics but also across wide areas of all-around development of students and institutes. Just not limiting herself to teaching, she has even contributed her knowledge in marketing domain through various research publications and presentation, and has also participated in numerous FDP on regular instances. She is a recipient of Young Women Achiever Award Nirupama 2018 from Aishwarya College of Education, Udaipur. Dr. Anupama Dev has also penned 3 books in the area of her research. Dr. Dev is significantly associated with GTU as Doctoral Process Committee member, also acting as editorial board member of 2 reputed journals. Dr. Anupama is serving as the PhD guide for students at Navrachana University and also acting as co-guide to research scholar at Marwadi University. She has been a guiding light by sharing her insights with faculties and industry associates as resource person at various universities. She has been rendering her services as subject expert, presenter for development of e-content for MOOC in the area of consumer behavior and branding. With no further delay, I now request you to take over the session, ma'am.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the generous introduction. I hope I'm audible, and I will just put it on presentation mode. Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank all the organizing committee members for have given me an opportunity to be among you all to share my experiences, mistakes, and understandings that I have when it comes to writing a report and a research paper. So what I've done is I've titled this entire session as research output because as ma'am rightly said in introduction that writing for research is what we aim at. So the ultimate output that we expect out of entire research that we undertake happens to be in form of the output that we are able to give, right? So what I have done is the contents of the session are going to be I will be talking about the research output a bit. I'll talk about the organization of research report and thesis, wherein I'll be sharing a few Word documents to show you what is the layout of a research report or a thesis. We will talk about organization of research paper, and once we have looked at this layout, we will be looking at individual elements because there is a lot of similarity in the contents that are placed in the report and paper, though the way they are placed, they are a bit different. So that is what we will be discussing in the last aspect, that is exploring each of those elements. So first I'll talk about the workshop that we are into. In this workshop, till this point of time, you have talked about research methodology, you have talked about sampling and sample designs or sample size rather. You talked about various data collection instruments and methods that are available. You talked about statistical techniques and data analysis. I guess you have looked at SPSS as a software that can be utilized for it. You have even talked about qualitative research in the past 4 days of this workshop that we have. Now, whatever we do, like whatever methodology we adopt, whatever sampling we take, whatever sample sizes we identify, whatever ways we use to collect the instrument, or maybe whatever techniques we are using, the way we are doing the data analysis, whatever research we undertake, the ultimate outcome or the output has to be in form of some research output. Now, this research output could be a report, it could be a research paper, or it could be a thesis. So that is why this session is the last session of this entire research methodology workshop, because whatever we have discussed till this point of time, placing it, writing it, and bringing it to the platter for the reader is again an art. It is a skill, right, that we, being researchers, need to understand. So that is what we are going to discuss in this 1 hour. So talking about the organization or maybe research output, before we start on with our research output, there are few elements that we need to take into consideration, or maybe they are very significant to us. So the first is going to be the layout of the output. So as I told you, like we in this session, we are just focusing on research report and research paper. So for research report, there is a different layout, there is a different structure which needs to be followed. The same goes on for the research paper also. There is a different research layout that needs to be followed. This layout actually many a times depends upon the journals in which you are planning to put up your paper, or maybe in the conferences in which you are planning to put up your paper, or maybe the agencies for which you are conducting the research. So that's the second point, that the layout of the research output that you are presenting, you should have. Being a researcher, you need to have a clarity of what is the structural outlook of the research output that I wish to present. Then, while you are doing it, there are two important perspectives that we need to highlight being a writer of that research output. The first is the research perspective. So, whenever we are writing something, we need to make sure that entire research, the methodology that we have adopted, the way we have moved on with the research, so that clarity should be given to the reader. And while doing so, the reader should be able to understand it. So there are two major perspectives that we need to take into consideration. That is, research perspective should be brought on the paper. And while we bring it to the paper, we should understand that who is my target audience, who is my reader, and accordingly, the entire perspective should be highlighted. The language, apt language should be used while we are writing it. So there are certain sections in which different type of text should be suitable, or maybe different voices are suitable. So accordingly, the language selection also has to be done, and then ultimately you have to proofread the entire document and finalize to see that whatever placement of contents you have done, whether it is going in accordance with the requirement or not. So these are the fundamental aspects that we need to take into consideration before we start writing. So before we start writing, we need to have a clarity of what is the structure, who has given the structure, is it a generic structure that we are following, or we are actually relying on to some agency or some journal requirement, or maybe some conferences requirement. And then while we put up all these things on paper, we need to understand the research perspective are presented well, so that people have an understanding of what exactly has been done, and the reader should be taken into consideration, for which the language management has to be done, and then content finalization has to be done. So having said that, if you look onto this entire thing, the first thing that comes on, or maybe the first thing that gets highlighted, is looking at the layout, right? So let us go on to explore a few layouts. So if you are planning to have a research report, it is going to have a different organization. For thesis, it is going to be different. And for research paper, it is going to be different. So at this point, I would like to share a Word document. And I would need a confirmation, ma'am, from the organizing team, if it is visible. Is the Word document visible, ma'am? Is the document shared? Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Thank you. So there are three Word documents which I'm going to show you. So when we talk about research report, one very fundamental aspect that I would want all of us to remember is, like, whatever is the layout, the first thing that we need to check is that with the agency with which we are associated to conduct the research, do they have a particular layout? If they have, we should go by that layout. Otherwise, this is the generic layout that has been followed. So it has a title page, then it has two letters. One is letter of transmittal and the other is letter of authorization. We'll be talking about these two. What does it mean? We'll have a table of content which should have the list of the index basically along with the figures and tables along with the page number. Then we need to have an executive summary. In executive summary, we need to have contents like objective, the methodology section, result, conclusion, and recommendation. Then we should have this body part, which should have contents like introduction, the research objective, the methodology, findings, conclusion and recommendation, and the limitation of the research, followed by the annexures, right? So we can have different type of annexures. We will discuss each of these elements further. Right now, I'm just showing you the layout. So this goes for a research report. Suppose say whatever research we have undertaken, the objective is to submit a thesis in form of a dissertation. So in that case, it may begin obviously with the title page, followed by a certificate and declaration. We should have an acknowledgement. We should have table of content, which should have list of table, charts, figures, and abbreviations if you have used them. Then we can have chapter number 1 as industry information. Maybe chapter 2 can be your theoretical framework or model that have been used. There are many places wherein these two are combined and that creates chapter 1. So that is also possible because it depends upon what type of research, I mean what area have we selected. Then I hope this Word document is visible. I'm showing organization of thesis. That is what I'm showing. The Word document.
We can see only the slides.
Okay, that's it. So I'll do one thing. I'll again share the screen. Just a minute. Was the first document visible, madam?
Um, Sorry,
I
ma'am.
guess. Okay, no issues. Now is it visible? I'll keep on sharing it again. So now I guess it is
Yes,
visible.
yes, ma'am. Now
Organization
it
of
is
thesis.
visible. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So as I told you, so there has to be like table of content, list of table, charts, figure, abbreviations. Chapter 1 could be industry information and chapter 2 could be theoretical framework. So there are certain cases where these two chapters are combined because it depends upon the research that you are undertaking. Then we need to have a literature review chapter. Then we need to have a research methodology chapter followed by data analysis and then finding, conclusion and implication, and then all the annexures can be there. Right. Now I'll show you the organization just of a research paper. So this is organization for a research paper, and right now what I'm showing you is for empirical paper. Now see, please you understand when we talk about research paper, there are different ways in which research paper can be written. Like there can be case studies, there can be conceptual papers. Nowadays there are even papers on systematic literature review. There are empirical papers. There are papers on meta-analysis. So every paper has a different way or layout or structure. But what I'm showing you is for empirical paper. So when we talk about a research paper, it ideally starts with an abstract which has certain parameters. We are going to discuss this in detail. So I'm just showing you a glance, like walking you through the contents. Then it has introduction, same way what we have for research report. This also has a section of literature review. This also has a section of research methodology, data analysis, findings, implication, and then references. So as I'm telling you again and again, whenever we plan to write something, the first thing that we need to check is like we have to see that if there are any suggestions from the journal or maybe the conference in which you are planning to present your paper or maybe you're putting your paper. So that is the first thing. If they don't have of that sort or the structure is not given, in that case, this is the layout that can be followed. So if you like, if we have an overview of all the three documents that I showed you, because the first one was not visible, I'll again show and get back to that. This was for the research report. Yeah. design was for the research report. So if you see, there are certain things which are in most common, like introduction, objectives, then the literature review section, then the data analysis. So they are all common. So I'm going to take it up common and just talk to you how they are going to be presented in a different way when it comes to report and paper. Rest, the things which are different that I will take up as individual. So these are the different layouts that can be practiced or maybe that can be accommodated while we are writing a research paper. So now I'm going again back to my PPT. Madam, if you can just confirm, is the PPT visible? We are on the slide organization of research paper. Ma'am.
Ma'am, the slides are visible, ma'am.
Thank you. So I've already shown you for report, I've shown you for thesis, and I've already shown you for research paper. And let us move on to how to write, which happens to be the essence of what we are discussing. So if you recall, when I showed you the outline for the research report, I showed you there are two letters. So one is the letter of authorization, and the other is the letter of transmittal. Now, what do we mean by letter of authorization is like whenever you are doing any project wherein a research agency or an agency has asked you to undertake a research, they will issue us a formal letter saying that Dr. Anupama is supposed to undertake a research on the title ABC and this is the time period for which and this is the requirement and so on. So then that becomes a letter of authorization because that is the documentary evidence of that you as an individual or as a researcher have been asked or maybe allotted the task of working on a particular research. So that is one of the components of research. Now that you have got this letter of authorization, once you are ending the research report, you will prepare a letter of transmittal. Now, letter of transmittal is a very essential aspect of a research report because it will be in form of a letter which says thanks to the client and then gives them a brief or maybe I would say it highlights whatever has been the output of the research. So it highlights the description of the report, it highlights the major findings. So when the agency receives your research report, by looking at the letter of transmittal, they shall be able to gauge an idea about what was the major outcome of the research that you have conducted. So these are the two letters that you need to have in your research report after you have the table of content and so on. Once we are done with this, then we have executive summary. So if it is a research report, then the thing that you have is in form of an executive summary if it is a research report. Now, what is an executive summary? As the word itself says, it's a summary. So it's a conclusory paragraph that you have to write, but then essentially it is almost at the beginning of the report. So when you're writing this executive summary, it has to have certain parameters like it should have the objective. So when you start writing your executive summary, you need to talk about what was the major objective of undertaking the research. Maybe in 3 or 4 sentences, you need to do that. Once you are done with that, you need to talk about the methodology in order to achieve those objectives that you have mentioned in executive summary. What was the process, what was the method that was being adopted to do needs to be elaborated. And then you need to talk about the results, like what were the major results that you derived out of the research that was being undertaken by you. Followed by the conclusions and suggestions that you have at hand for the company for whom you have undertaken the research. So this becomes the part of a research report. But then, if you are writing a research paper, we don't have an executive summary there. In that case, we usually have an abstract. So in abstract, there is a difference between executive summary and abstract. Executive summary usually is more lengthier. 1 page is what usually is the length of an executive summary. But when it comes to abstract, depending upon the journals, they give you a word limit. Maximum which I have seen till date happens to be 300 words, but the most adapted one happens to be 150 to 200 words. So see, I'm telling you it is words. So we have to limit ourselves in the way we would be serving all this information in the research paper. So in an abstract, we can talk about the purpose of research, we can talk about the methodology that has been adopted by us, we can talk about the results that we derived out of it, we can talk about implications, theoretical implications and practical implications that we have had in the research that we have undertaken, followed by the keywords. So maximum we need to have 3 to 5 keywords. In some journals they even say 5 to 8 keywords. So keywords should be arranged in an alphabetical order, and the minimum word limits we need to check with the journal in which we are planning to publish our research paper. So now, usually what happens is, what I have observed is, whenever there is a call for paper, right? So what usually happens is, people they start writing abstract and then they undertake the research, which is not the correct way. So abstract is something which should include information like what you have done, how you have done, what were the major results that you have derived, what are the implications, both theoretical and practical. That can be only we can have as a researcher, we can have clarity about all these aspects only and only when we have completed the entire research, right? So abstract is a point which should be like a summary of everything that you have done and should be written at the end of the research process, or after completion of your entire research is what we should actually write the abstract. Now to give you a better idea of what this is, I'm showing you few examples. We will see 3 examples very quickly. So this is one of the abstracts wherein you can see that there are certain keywords. Just a minute, I'll highlight few things. So there are keywords over here. Like you can see, so the abstract, there are no pointers, but then ultimately they are talking about these points only, which I have shared over here. So it is talking about the purpose. So it is talking about the purpose over here, what they did, who were the people whom they had connected with, how did they do, and what was the result. So I'm not reading it out, I'm just showing you that how different bits and pieces are to be collected properly and then they are supposed to be placed. So this is one example. This is again a second example. So again, see, you would see a lot of keywords over here. Then you would see first paragraph wherein we are talking about what was the purpose, how they have done it is what is highlighted over here, and then what was the result is what they have highlighted over here. So you would see that all these things are placed only in that limit of 150 200 words that was being stipulated by the journal in which they were published. But this is an example of abstract only, but this type of abstract is known as structured abstract because they have pointers. So see, they will say purpose, then they say design, and then it says findings, you see research limitation, practical implication, originality, and keywords, and the paper type is a research paper. So you will, whatever I have highlighted, it talks about the purpose, then they have talked about what, how many people were there in this entire thing, what was the method that was being adopted by them, what were the major findings and how did they do it. So this is again an example of an abstract. Now after abstract, whether it is a research paper or it is a research report, the next element happens to be an introduction. So when we are essentially writing our introduction, we should begin with understanding that what is our knowledge, right? I hope the slides are changing. Is the slide changing?
No, ma'am. We are in
We
slide
are
7,
on.
ma'am.
Okay. So let me do one thing. So I'll not put it into the F5 mode and I'll just keep it like this so that I guess you are able to see. Is it visible this? The pyramid is visible?
Yes,
Is the
ma'am. Now
pyramid
we can
visible?
see introduction.
Yeah, yes ma'am. So these were the abstract which I was sharing with you. So like abstract can be like this and all the data in the abstract needs to have this alignment where you are talking about the purpose, you're talking about the methodology, you talk about the results, the implication. So every abstract there is a limit of 150 to 200 words and you need to make sure that all data is compiled in this way. So this is an example of a structured abstract which I was referring to. So structured abstract is like wherein you have certain parameters, like pointers are already fixed, like purpose, methodology, findings, and then only with reference to those aspects you will be talking. So that is what is a structured abstract. Now we are on slide 13, which talks about introduction. So when we talk about an introduction, we first need to start with something like what is known to us, like what is available on public domain, right? So that is what we initially begin with. Once we are done with that, that can be necessary about the industry. For example, if I'm trying to understand that brand equity dimensions, the cell phones, right? So I may be talking about the cell phone industry, right? Cell phone industry, how it is growing, what is the future, and so on. So whatever is known to me. So that is the first parameter that I may highlight. Once I am done with it, I will try to interrelate my research with what is unknown. You know, in terms of this much information is available, but these are the contents which are lacking, or maybe the information of this sort is not available, and this is what I'm searching for. So introduction should initially begin with an understanding of what we already know. Then we should narrow it down to what is unknown, and then create an importance of the research that we are undertaking. And lastly, in the introductory paragraph, we need to talk about how and why we are trying to address these gaps. So when we talk about the introduction, it is like a pyramid, which will start with a very broad base, then it will narrow down, and then again narrow down to what research we are undertaking. So that is how an introductory paragraph should be there. So actually, I even wanted to share a few PDFs, but I do it at the end because then that's creating problems with my slide sharing. So I do it at the end. Then the next topic that comes up after introduction slide is a literature review, right? I hope the slide is visible. So when we talk about the literature review should have four major elements into it. So the first element is like first is we need to understand the literature themes. Okay, and after analyzing the literature themes, for example, if I'm trying to work on brand equity dimensions, right? So when I say brand equity dimensions, there are five different facets to it. It had brand awareness, it talked about perceived quality, and so on. So there are five of them. So maybe what I can do is while I'm collecting the literature, I can divide it into different themes, and then in those themes, I can look on with try to identify the gap. So the second perspective happens to be the research gap. The research gap needs to be identified. So I can look into the limitations of the papers that I have referred, see what is pending, what is missing, and see whether they are in alignment with what I am including, and then research gaps can be identified. Once these gaps are being identified, then the next thing that I can do is framing the research questions. There are many research reports, research papers, which usually don't go on to talk about research questions, but you may do it because it gives a researcher a better clarity of what actually he or she was trying to understand. I mean, what were the points that they initially raised. So research questions can be placed. So based on the gaps that we have identified, we can formulate our research questions. And then those questions can be formulated into the meaningful research objectives. Right? So it is like steps. One, we look into all the literature themes, we write for those literature themes, we identify gaps that are there in the literature themes. From that, we go on to understand what could be the research questions. As I said, many papers they don't use this technique, or maybe they don't show the research questions, but it is always good to show the research questions. And I will even show you a PDF or maybe a research paper which is talking in that line, and then we can come down to our research objective. So there is one paper which I will show you for this. So what we have talked about is we started off with our research paper. We talked about the executive summary in case of research report. We talked about abstract in case of research paper. Then we have this introductory paragraph. When an introduction has been written, so it should be narrowed down. We begin with a broad base where we talk about what we know. Then we come down to what is unknown or maybe what is missing. And then we put our perspective as to how are we uncovering those unknown things. So that is a pyramid that should be there in the introductory paragraph. Then we move on to literature review, wherein again we can have four important elements which can be depicted in our research outputs that we are formulating, maybe in form of research report or maybe the research paper. So we can talk about the themes that we have, we can identify the gaps in each of those themes, we can place our research questions and followed by the objectives. Now, once we are done with this, by this time we should have a clarity of the methodology that we are adapting, on which you have discussed a lot in the first few sessions of this workshop. So while we are putting our methodology, now here we need to be very clear, crisp and very, very good with this particular field. Because in major cases, when we are sending our paper in good journals, they actually read the abstract, they look at the methodology, and they look at the implication aspect. So this is my experience. So if you have concrete abstract, if you have good methodology section, along with good implication, both theoretical and practical, it gives a good wavelength to your research, and the chances of getting published in good journals, or maybe the research report getting accepted quickly or maybe appreciated, increases, right? So when we talk about methodology, ma'am, I hope the screen is visible. We are on slide 15. So when we are talking about the
Yes,
methodology
ma'am. We
section,
are on the slide, methodology slide. Yes, ma'am.
yes, ma'am, methodology side. Thank you. So when we are talking about methodology, there are few things that we should bring up. Like we should talk about the research design that we have adopted, and in sampling, we should tell them about who was our sample, from where we began, what was the method that we had adopted, and how much size was selected by us. Then we should even talk about the data collection instrument, DCI, right? Like whether we have moved on with questionnaire, if it was a questionnaire, was it online, offline, if it was online, what was the tool that was being used to create the questionnaire, and so on. And then we can even talk about the data analysis in terms of what were the tools, what were the softwares that were used in order to analyze the data that was being collected. So this is the methodology section. And as I told you, I'll share few PDFs later, but one image I'm sharing over here. So this is the methodology of one of the papers. Yeah. So it talks about, it is titled as methods, and then the author has talked about the questionnaire. So that has was the data collection instrument for them. They have talked in length about the questionnaire, that it had sections. A was about this, B was about this many statements, and so on. They have talked about their participants, that is the sample. They say that who these people were, how many people, like how much data was collected from whom, how they had collected. And there is one very important aspect into this. If you look into this last line, it says refer table 1 demographic classification. So I will talk about the importance of this section, which many a times is missed by the researcher. Then it is followed by the statistical analysis. So it is talking about that how did they undertake the analysis, what was the tool that was being used, and so on. So when we talk about our methodology section, if you look back to the example that I showed you, it was talking about the design, it was talking about the sample, it was talking about the data collection instrument, it was even talking about the data analysis software. So this is how the methodology section should be placed, because when we write a research paper, we should always remember it's not for us. It is for a reader. It is for an agency to read. So they should have a clarity of how the entire process was undertaken. So if you are able to undertake the process well and document the process well, then and then only you will be able to create a differentiating impact as a researcher. So methodology section has to be very, very concrete. And you don't have to do anything to do this. It is just simply putting into paper what you have actually practiced. As simple as that. So after methodology section comes the data analysis. So now what we have done, we wrote our abstract, we just talked about a research paper, we talked about our abstract, we had our introduction, we had our literature review, then we have talked about our research methodology, and then comes the data, right? So you have collected a lot of information, lot of numbers are there, right? But then you need to put all those numbers into meaningful pictures, right? So you need to present your data into a way that readers are able to understand. Because when it comes to research report, maybe your reports may have some length, that is maybe more than 60 pages, or maybe 100 pages, or something like that. Because when it comes to the normal projects that we accept for students. So it is usually 60 to 100 pages. Or maybe if it is a thesis, then it would have some scope to write and elaborate. But that doesn't go through when it comes to a research paper. You have to confine yourself to maybe 10, 12 pages, and in many cases, Good journals would say you have to limit yourself to 2,000 words. There also they're not mentioning the pages. They say 2,000 words. They say 3,000 words. So then just imagine that you have collected so much of data from 500, 600 people, and then you are supposed to show them and document all those things into few pages, into few words. So that's a very tough process, you know. So in data analysis section, what we need to do is what we need to begin with essentially is by talking about the sample characteristics. Right? Now, when I say sample characteristics, I'm talking about the demographic profile of the respondent. This area, many people they may feel it's not of any use, right? Or maybe it can be ignored, but that's not true. The beauty of research is its capacity to generalize the information that has been collected. Right? When you are presenting your research report and talking about the sample characteristics, you are telling people that who were your respondent, from whom the data has been collected. And when people are looking at your sample characteristics, they will get an idea of whether the results of this research can be generalized or not, whether it is applicable to the other section or strata or sample or not, or maybe of the population. So that is why sample characteristics is very, very important. You should never forgo that particular aspect. Maybe you may not create pie charts for each of them, but maybe a table can be created. I'll show you how that can be done. So sample characteristics is very, very essential. If you don't have space, maybe it can be kept somewhere in the annexure, but that should not be forgotten at any given point of time. And then you should go on to represent all the data that has been collected by you with appropriate charts or maybe diagrams or figures, whatever is the best way to represent that particular data. And if you have performed any statistical test, that also needs to be represented. So I'll give you one example of this. So if you can see over here, I'll just enlarge the image. So this is how the demographic classification can be represented in form of a table. So what happens is when you're creating a table, you are confining yourself, all the numbers are within the table, you don't have to write more about it, but still it talks about the way in which this research can be generalized. So sample characteristics or maybe the demographic classification is a very, very essential part and should never be ignored because your entire research output is based on this demographic classification that you're presenting. So that should be taken into consideration. Then, as I told you, okay, you can even have tables and charts where you are showing that what are the analysis that has been done by you. So, for example, table 4 correlation analysis. You can even you should write what is the tool that has been used. For example, I have computed this correlation with the help of SPSS 21. I put it as source data analysis SPSS 21. And I have done this table 3 which says goodness of local analysis for structural model, and the source happens to be MOS 21. So you need to mention the source everywhere. That is very, very important when it comes to research. So now what we have done is the research output. You should begin with all those preliminary pages that you should have the certificate declaration, then you have the table of content and the index, the figures, charts and everything, and then the main body of report actually starts with the executive summary in case of research report. If it is a research paper, it should have an abstract. Abstract has its own limitation, so we need to understand that how many words are allowed in the journal in which we are planning to get it published. Then we need to have this introduction section. So if it is a research paper or if it is a research report, the concept remains the same, only the length will differ. For example, if you have a research report, maybe you can include a lot of graphs, charts, which shows about what has been the trend in the industry, which may not be done when it is a research paper because you have the limitation to number of pages and the number of words that we can incorporate. So after we have the introduction, then we have literature review, wherein you will be talking about what has been done in the past and identify the gaps, create your research questions, and come on to the objective. Once we are set with the literature review, then comes the methodology section, which is very, very significant. Having said that, I don't say that others are not significant, but then this is more important because we're talking about research outputs. The methodology has to be very clear. So research output, we need research methodology, we need to talk about the design, we need to talk about the sample, we need to talk about how we have collected the data, how we have analyzed the data. So all those things need to be put up in the methodology section very particularly. And then once we are done with them, it then comes the data analysis. So while you are analyzing the data, there are three aspects that we need to consider. One, we have to look into like give a good amount of time and to understand that how do we place the information of demographic profile of a correspondent. Then we have to talk about various analysis that we want to do in form of charts or graphs if there are any, or maybe directly move on to the statistical test. Once this data analysis has been done, then is the major work. So people usually feel, now that I have done the analysis and I'm done. No, actually your major work comes after data analysis, which is finding, conclusion, discussion, and implication, and future scope of study. Now, when I'm talking about finding, conclusion, and discussion, one very important aspect that needs to be considered is finding, suggestion, and conclusion should go in accordance with the research title that we have set up. Okay. So if suppose I'm trying to find out impact of brand equity dimension on say mobile phones. So whatever findings, conclusions and discussions I'm putting up, it should be with reference to what was the impact. As simple as that. So every chart of your, every table of your which has the potential to infer the impact of brand equity on cell phone buying behavior should be represented over here. All the statistical tests that you have performed which have the potential and power to tell you yes it is having an impact or maybe no it doesn't have an impact should be represented by you in this section, that is finding, conclusion and discussion. Now once, so basically when I'm talking about this section, it is about my research, right? It is about my research, what I have done. So that is what we are putting over here. Now comes implication. Now when it comes to implication, there are two types of implication, and nowadays good journals, reputed journals look for this type of area. That is what has been your theoretical implication, what is your managerial implication. Now what I mean by theoretical implication is, for example, suppose say you have taken up a theory, right? For example, brand equity dimension, that's a theory that has been given by multiple authors and I have stick to a theory given by David Aker. Now, suppose when my research could identify that David Aker had proposed 5 elements, and out of those 5 elements, one of them is not useful according to my research, and a new dimension has been added onto the model. Okay, I'm again saying this. Suppose say I have selected a model which says that there are 5 dimensions. I undertook a research and I could find out out of these 5, one of the dimensions is not relevant and there's a new dimension that is coming up and then I put it in my paper. That becomes my theoretical implication because there was an existing theory which was there and my research has contributed to that particular theory. It can even be that this was the theory and according to my research this theory or maybe the same theory continues, there is no change. Something like that also can be done, but then that is not an addition that can be made, right? So that is what we mean by theoretical implication. The second is managerial implication. Now managerial implication is like how your research that you have undertaken happens to be useful for people who are practicing it, the practicing managers. So for example, again my title, if it was brand equity dimensions on smartphone, right? So smartphone manufacturers or marketers are the people for whom my research would be valid, right? So then I have to make it a point to present and put up that how my research is going to be useful to them. Maybe there are 5 dimensions and for a practicing manager, for dimension 1, do this and you will be able to attract more consumers. Like I mentioned too, if you have these strategies, you will be able to attract more audiences, something like that. So there is a difference between theoretical and managerial implications, and good journals, they many a times best reject the paper, or maybe when you are undertaking even a research report, the major crux of the research report, or the agency that is giving you fund to conduct that research is asking for this only. We are having this problem and please give a solution to it. So basically implication is nothing but the solution. What did you find new? What is how is your research different? What is the addition? So that is what we mean by implication. And the last is further scope of study. Again, this is very, very important. The reason of further scope being important is like you as a researcher may have only studied a particular model, but then there are different models that would actually exist in that area. When I say brand equity dimension, there are a lot many people, many authors were given this, but I have only relied my entire research on one of the models. So in this area, what you can do is you can talk about the other prominent models that are coming up, which can be used up by the other researcher. Further scope of study, more than you do, is useful for upcoming researchers, because by reading your paragraph of further scope of study, they will be able to get an understanding about what is not done basically, and that gap can be identified. So you in your research paper should place potential, or maybe should give something valid for upcoming researchers also. So the basic notion is, if I'm done with data collection and if I've applied some statistical test, my research is done. No, that is just the beginning, because based on whatever data you have collected, you have to create this section which talks about findings, inclusion and discussion, which talks about implication, which talks about further scope of study, which is very, very important. Then, so this brings an end to the major body of the paper. Then, if it is a research report, this doesn't apply. I'm again repeating, this doesn't apply to a research paper. This is for research report or maybe for thesis. So, in that case, you may have annexure. In the annexure, you can keep the questionnaire, that is the data collection instrument, that can be kept. If there are any statistical outputs in which the table is very, very big. For example, say you have done in SPSS and you have done cross tabulation, and the tables are very large, and you then wanted to put it in the main body of the thesis. So in such cases, those tables can be kept as a part of appendix. You can have any table that you have quoted into the text, but you felt it's too large or maybe more not that relevant into the thesis, can be a part of your annexure. You should have bibliography, that is all the material that you have read or any supporting material. For example, if it is a thesis, a final thesis that you have submitted. So in case of thesis, along while you are undertaking your research, maybe you would have come up with some publications. You may have attended a few conferences wherein you would have presented the paper. So all those support material, whatever is required from by your university, can be kept up or maybe placed. So other supporting material can even be, for example, if you have taken some interviews, some experts were interviewed, so maybe their visiting cards or maybe images where you were interviewing them can be kept. Like it depends upon how, what type of research you are undertaking, whether if you want to keep them anonymous, accordingly you can place the information, because it completely depends upon what type of research you are conducting, right? So all those information can be a part of your appendix for the research report and for the thesis that you are submitting. Now, there are two terminologies which you would hear multiple times. One is bibliography and the other is references. So many people are not even aware about what's the difference between a bibliography and reference. So when it is a research paper, usually they would ask you to put a reference list. The reference actually consists of all those secondary sources that you have referred and put it into the text that you have written. So everything that you have cited, becomes part of your reference. So, for example, for writing a research paper, I have referred 5 research papers and I have referred 10 different web links, company websites. So, all the 10 and 5, that is 15, will become a part of references. But while I was working on my research, I have checked 20 research papers, I have seen 20 websites. So, that is 40. That becomes your bibliography. So basically, the difference between a bibliography and references is whatever background reading that you have done can be a part of bibliography. But when it comes to referencing, only the things that are cited by you or maybe that have been used by you in writing the research is usually put up into the research paper. So there is a difference between bibliography and references. So if you look into dissertations or maybe thesis, usually they go on to show the bibliography, right? Because that's a work that you have done for years, number of years. So you would have obviously done a lot of background reading. But when it comes to research paper, the expectation usually is for references, and this is how the reference looks. So reference also has different formats, different styling techniques. So it can be APA, it can be the other way around, but APA is the one which usually management people refer to. So this is how the references can be created, and they should also be alphabetically ordered, right? So now I'll like to stop here, and I would like to quickly show you few documents. Madam, I hope I have maybe 5 minutes, 5 to 2 to 3 minutes would be sufficient. Ma'am,
Yes, ma'am.
I just show one
Ma'am, we have
research
time.
paper.
You just carry on, ma'am. Continue,
Okay,
ma'am.
fine. Okay, okay. So I would want to actually show the research paper which I wanted to do along with the PPT, but then that's okay. I'll now go here. Yeah. Ma'am, if you could please confirm, is it visible? So this is a research paper, and I'm
Yes,
showing
ma'am, it
this
is
because
visible.
yeah, yes, ma'am, thank you. So I'm showing this because report showing would take a lot of time. So rather than that, showing one of the research output, which mostly almost all the participants would be using and would have to use, would be a research paper. So that's why I'm showing you this. So this is the abstract, and if you recall the session that I took, I told you this is a structured abstract, right? Then they have an introduction. I'm not going to read out everything. I've just put a comment. So what they did is, like here, they have talked about what is known to them. So if you see, they have all the secondary information. That is what they have placed over here. They have cited it appropriately. You see that the reports. It is PwC report that they are talking about over here. It is an RBI report that this is known as in-text citation. So this is how you have to. So all this is already available. What is already known. So that is how they have put up all the things. Something they wanted to put up, but they have not kept it over here. So for that, tables have been created by them. So this is table number 1, which they have created. So when you are talking about a research paper, what happens is you have a limitation. You cannot go on to add a lot of pages into it. So accordingly, you need to understand that how do I place the contents that I have, and that is actually an art and a skill. That needs a lot of practice for you to place it accordingly. So see, if you see, the research of the author has quoted various reports over here, and he is talking about what is already known. Then there comes a point wherein he is talking about what is unknown and how we can address the gap. So over here in these few lines, he's talking about this is what is already existing, but these are several aspects which are not there. And then he has come on to his research question. So if you recall, I told you there are few authors who may bring up this perspective of research question. There are few who may ignore this part. So that is actually on depending upon how skillful the research like the author is, only how does he want his research flow to look. So there is no mandate as to the research question should be there, but then if it is there, it gives a lot of clarity. So he's talking about gap, he's talking about research questions. So if you recall the literature review wala section which I was talking to you, I told you the literature themes you create, you identify the gap, you create a research question, and then you create a research objective. So then he has talked about this research question, and then for this research question, he has made a discussion. So this is all talking about what is unknown and how his research that he has undertaken can be of use, right? And while doing so, he has even quoted a lot of authors. So this is a part of like he has interwoven his literature gaps with the literature review that he has conducted. So that is how he has done. He has talked about because this person has used a theory. So if you recall, while I was talking about the implication section, I told you there can be theoretical implication, there can be managerial implication. So see, this person has relied on a particular theory, which is UTA-UT2 model. So this is the model that he has talked about. So he's talked about that theory a bit, and then if we scroll down, he has talked about different literature themes, innovation resistant theory, and so on. And then after coming on to all these things, he has talked about the objectives for the research. That okay, because this is the gap, this is my question, this is what theory say, this is why I am doing this research. So that is how he has placed it. Then he has talked about hypothesis development. So he himself has tried to. So there was a theory that was already there, but then he has created something new, something he has done, which we don't need to get into detail, but I'm just showing you how it goes. So this is the theoretical framework actually that he's talking about. And for each of them, he has talked about how did he develop the hypothesis. So say performance expectancy to BI and effort expectancy to BI. So he has talked about how did he develop all of them, and then he has quoted few literatures which are like justifying that whether there is a relation that exists between them or not. And this is how it goes on. So this is for all the hypotheses. Let's quickly scroll down. Yeah. Then comes the methodology section. So he has talked about measures, that is, what from the literature review, which are the major crux or maybe how the questionnaire measures or maybe items were developed. He has talked about that. Then he has talked about the instrument, that is questionnaire or maybe the data collection instrument. So if you see the wordings are also different. So there is no defined limit to only these terms are to be used. You can use it, but then what is the major thing is that you should be able to justify what has been done and how it has been done. The better you are able to present it, the better it would be. CDS has a section wherein he's talking about sampling and data collection. So he's saying that they were from Pune and these were the people, and then see there is table 2 which shows his questionnaire. His entire questionnaire is also there in one of the tables. And see, this is the table which talks about his questionnaire and all the instruments that he has used. So I'm just scrolling. Then he has talked about this, results. So if you recall, I told you the demographic profile is very important. So he has used table 3 when he has talked about who were the people whom he has responded. So this is table 3. You can see here a respondent's demographic profile, and he has given good amount of details. So this tabular representation can actually save a lot of space of yours. And then this is the analysis. Then I quickly scroll on to. So he has done this discussion. After this discussion, he has talked about theoretical contribution. So if you remember, when I was showing you this paper, I told you he has taken up a theory. So then he has now justified that what is the addition that he has done in the theory. Then he has talked about implications. So this is going to be the practical implication from the managerial perspective, right? And then the future research direction. So these 3 paragraphs, they usually in many of the cases are ignored, but they are very very important because when a journal or maybe in a conference when you are presenting your paper, these are the few elements, that's abstract, the methodology, and your implications or maybe the contributions. These are few paragraphs which are given a lot of importance, and then he has this list of references. So now, do we have time or we are done?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have
Shall
time?
we? Yes, ma'am, we have time.
Just one image I would like to show them.
Yes, ma'am, sure, ma'am, please.
Yeah, this is a bit different. That's why I'm highlighting. I'm sorry to do that, but then. Yeah, like this was a paper wherein the material, they then had this questionnaire, and the way they had executed this entire research, I assume that the PDF is visible, ma'am. Is it visible? Material and methods, ready to eat meals. Is
Yes,
it
ma'am, it
visible?
is visible. Materials and methods.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Please,
ma'am.
ma'am.
So, in this paper, they had done it completely differently. They had actually identified the ready-to-eat products. They had clicked the images. They had asked people to paste it, and they had done a very different, very different way. So, if you see, they have a section which says ready-to-eat meals, and then there is table one. There's a pasta, or there's a ingredient packaging. Though it is a marketing paper, so that's why they are talking about packaging material and all. But look at the way they have analyzed and presented everything. So many times we may feel we want to read this, but no, this is not the fact. You need to understand that what are you doing and how you want to put it. There is that's a researcher's instinct. You need to explain and elaborate how you have done. So for all the products that we have taken, the researcher has taken, they have listed out ingredients, packaging, and images. And I would like to show one more aspect. Have a look at this. So they had actually three sections, and then to one of the section they had shown this plate with ready food. For one, they had only showed the packet, and the second, the third set, they had asked them to taste and then even see the packet. So this is how. So look at the way even pictures are kept. So there is no mandate. Okay, when we say research writing, only this is to be done. Have a look at this. So they are having photograph of everything to prove that this is the method that we had adapted. This is the way we had done it. So when there are people, so that's it. So this is the differentiating element which I wanted to show to you all. So when there are people who believe that there are certain protocol and only this much can be written, we have to limit ourselves to this thing, only these contents are to be included. So that's not the case. Being a researcher, we need to understand that what is the research that has been undertaken by us, and accordingly we need to place the information. So the moral of the story is that we need to justify that what has been done and how it has been done. So that is the crux or maybe the skill which is required when we plan to present a research output in whatever formats it may be. So if we are skillful and if we are able to do it well, we will be able to present and create a good, distinct image in the mind of the readers. So that's it from my end. Thank you very much for listening to me. And if there are any questions, I'm open to that.
Thank you, ma'am. We shall now move on to the question and answer session. Participants, if you have any questions, you can post it in the comment box.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope there is some output to the discussion that we have had. Research is a continuous process, see, so we are all learning together. So the more we write, the more we explore, we get on to understand lot many new perspectives. So those things keep on unfolding. But for that we need to write. We need to get a lot of rejections, and then we are able to do it well. So that's what I believe. So rejection is not the end; it is the beginning. To be honest. Thank you. Thank you, sir. If there are any questions,
Ma'am, we have a question
yes.
whether we have to mention both aims and objectives in our research, in our report, research report. I think that
Objectives.
is what she has meant by.
Objectives are to be mentioned. Now, see, it is upon a researcher to decide that when you say aims and objectives, for a reader they would be the same. So, what is usually kept as aims is not the word that we use. We put it as research objectives, and we list down all the objectives that are there in order that we are aiming to undertake for the research. So, objectives is what we look at, not the aims. We don't have any section wherein we see aims. I hope I've clarified that.
Yes, ma'am. I think there is no more questions because the presentation was so clear, ma'am.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So I would like to thank
Yes.
all the participants
Good evening
and
to
for the
everyone.
appreciation.
As all good things come to an end in life, so is the successful completion of 5-day national level workshop. On behalf of Department of BCom Corporate Secretaryship and Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Sri Krishnaswamy College for Women, I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to those who have directly and indirectly contributed to this national level workshop on research methodology. On the outset, I would like to thank all our resource person, Dr. Mamta Brahmat, Dr. Nisha Channa, Dr. Prayal Sangavi, and Dr. Anupama Dev for enlightening us with the knowledge and experience shared through this workshop. We are thankful to our chairman, management trustees, and our dean, Dr. R. Revati, for their continuous motivation. I would like to thank our principal, Dr. Anita Rajendran, for her enthusiastic support throughout the program. My immense thanks to Ms. Rupavati, head in charge, for her guidance in overall organization of this workshop. I would like to extend sincere gratitude to all the participants from various institutions for having contributed their time. Once again, I thank everyone for having made this program productive and successful. Thank you all. Dear participants, feedback link will be posted in WhatsApp group. All are requested to fill it for the certificate purpose. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you to the organizing team, Rupa ma'am and Mamta ma'am, to have got me connected to this. It was indeed a pleasure. Thank you. I think I can leave.
Uh, yes, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.